Oh, hello and welcome to the morning sports briefing. I am Paul, your not paying attention host by the looks of things, here on the New Zealand Sports Radio. We bring you the morning sports briefing at 8 a.m. every single morning, 7 days a week, so don't forget to join us. Today in the show, we have cancellations everywhere and not a game to play, history made in the PDC home tour, LU and players agree to shortcuts, and a current commentator and ex-player takes a shot at players in the NRL. But today, we're in football news. We just have one item, which is that the Chinese Super League team Waan Zhao have made an emotional homecoming. It's taken them 103 days to get home. They when the coronavirus was at its peak in one province in China, they were on their they were on a training camp in Spain, and so decided to stay there. They've had to take a prolonged trip through Germany to Shenzhen, where they had 3 weeks of quarantine. And finally, after all of this, they have managed to get home. So they had an emotional homecoming, as you can imagine there. Moving on to cricket news, and I'll hand you over to Ashwin.
Good morning, Paul, and good morning to all the viewers and listeners out there on a beautiful Monday morning here in Auckland. Anyway, so as Paul mentioned in the headlines, cancellations everywhere, and not a cricket game to play. So as we go around the world in this time that we have, BJ Watling is the latest, along with Glenn Maxwell and James Faulkner, to mutually agree to end their contracts with their English county teams. All three of them had signed with Lancashire for the upcoming season. But as mentioned, as happening across many sports, international contracts are being cancelled. In other news, cricket, South Africa, CSA, are having massive money problems. It's already forecasted up to $50 million US in the hole, up to the 2022 rights cycle. That appears to be getting bigger. CSA are highly dependent on incoming tours, like most places, for their revenue stream. And the previous administration had overseen millions lost in sponsorship and broadcast rights. One thing is for sure, the hole will only get a lot bigger than the $50 million already there. And finally, those that like collecting memorabilia are able to buy more. Little Bangladesh batsman Mushfiqur Rahim is putting up his bat for auction. It's not any old bat. It's the bat that he scored the double hundred with against Sri Lanka in Gaul. So it's an away test. The proceeds will be going to the COVID-19 efforts for relief back at home in Bangladesh. And that's your cricket news for today, Paul.
Thank you very much, Ashwin. I will hand you over to Stephen from the far north. Actually, he's the only Stephen who will be bringing us up to date on the birthdays today.
Thank you for that, Paul, and good morning to everybody out there. This morning in birthdays, a former Blackburn making an impact off the field, a para-athlete who picked up a bronze medal, and an All Black returning from injury. And that's pretty much where we start this morning. Damien McKenzie is a New Zealand Rugby Union player who plays fullback or first 5'8" for Waikato in the Mitre 10 Cup and for the Chiefs in Super Rugby. He has also played international rugby for New Zealand, having earned 23 caps since his debut in 2016. McKenzie has also represented both New Zealand at under 20 level and New Zealand Māori. Damien Sinclair McKenzie, born this day, the 20th of April 1995 in Invercargill. He is 25 today. Now on to Rory McSweeney, is a New Zealand para-athlete primarily competing in the javelin throw. He represented New Zealand at the 2016 Summer Paralympics in Rio de Janeiro, where he won the bronze medal in the men's javelin throw T44. Now I'll explain a little bit about T44. It's a disability sport classification for disability athletes applying to single below knee amputation, or an athlete who can walk with moderately reduced function in one or both legs. At the age of 3, he was hit by a truck in Lower Hutt, New Zealand, which resulted in his leg being amputated below the knee. Rory McSweeney, born on this day, 20th of April, 1985 in Wellington. He is 35 today, and he just recently retired in November 2019. Now, moving on to finally, Blackburn. Mona Lisa Urquhart Nee Codling is a former New Zealand Rugby Union player. She played for Auckland and previously for Otago. Codling attended Kelston Girls College and played for the national team from 1998 to 2010. The 2000 Women's Rugby World Cup was her fourth successful World Cup. Mona Lisa Urquhart, born this day, the 20th of April 1977 in Auckland. She is 43 today. A couple of little interesting side notes. Mona Lisa is currently the Business and Special Projects Manager for the British Council and Pacific Islands here in Auckland, specialising in statistics, IT, and web development, the arts and sports specific to be rugby. She was also the first woman to be voted on to the Barbarians Committee. So would be certainly an interesting interview, Paul.
Absolutely, yeah. We'll have to also reach out to her and first off, wish her a happy birthday, and then see if she'll do an interview as well. In rugby news, the Australian Union and the players have come to agreement on this, and the headline is that the ARU will be saving 83% of its wage bill, but that's because they will be getting a subsidy from the government on the JobKeeper allowance for 6 million Australian dollars, which will cover about 50% of the wages that will be paid. So they only have to pay that 2.6 million themselves. So the 60% wage cut, which is what it actually ends up being across them all. But you've got, as with a lot of these ones, it's a matter of being staged. So the lower players again get themselves get protected quite rightly, whereas the players higher up take much more cuts than them. Also, there is provision in there for players who earn over 200,000 a year and would also have a number of years in the bank for New Zealand, which basically means that the top earners like Michael Hooper, Curtly Beale, Matt Tamua, and Dane Helen-Petty, who will sacrifice more than $1 million between them, will be eligible, to have a Super Rugby sabbatical. Now, initially, I think it was all thought that sabbatical would take place in 2021, but now that sabbatical can take place between 2021 and 2023, so staged over 3 years. Other players that might be eligible for this Tavita Kurandrani and Isaac Rodder as well, but it's not known which ones will take that sabbatical and when they would take it as well. So clearly, it's a very nervous time it's been a very confusing time for the players. It's also a very nervous time for the Olympians whose contracts come up or end at the end of August. Now, obviously, with the Olympics being postponed by 12 months, you would expect that those contracts would be extended by 12 months as well, but maybe not. So it's definitely a nervous time and a hard time for sports people, for people everywhere, and for sports people over in Australia. That's your rugby news. I'm going to hand you back now to Stephen Harris, who will take us through the league news.
Thanks again, Paul. Well, it seems as though former Bronco great Gordon Tallis has got out of the wrong side of the bed yesterday morning, because he's woken up and he's decided to slam players who are complaining about having to move interstate to restart the NRL. Non-New South Wales. God, I've just lost the plot. Non-New South Wales clubs are facing prospect of having to relocate to Sydney as the NRL targets restart date of May 28th. But that hasn't gone down with some players who have voiced their concern about the proposal. Cameron Smith has spoken out in the past, while Darius Boyd said he would rather quit the sport than move from his Brisbane home and be away from his family. Boyd said, no chance in hell I could do 4 months away from my family, and that's something I wouldn't be okay with. Tallis, however, countered that by saying players were lucky to play the game and still to be in a job. I want to call this BS on players and clubs at the moment, Tallis told Triple M radio station. And whether it's Queensland clubs or Darius Boyd saying that they don't want to leave home, I think they're lucky to do the job that they're doing. They go out They go out there and play rugby league. That's a privilege, I believe. I drove past local Centrelink and there was a line of 300 metres of people that have lost their jobs. And these guys have got an opportunity to go and earn money, and they're saying that they don't want to do this. I think it's a bit of a kick in the guts belly for all Australians. Journalist Paul Kent suggested on the Triple M show many players are concerned for their mental health, and that is what is leading to their opposition. Callis, however, replied by saying it'll get worse when there's no money coming in. And I must admit, I had a quick look at the social network last night, and he was copping a lot of criticism of his own. Was former Bronco Gordon Tallis. Pretty much easy to say when you're not in that situation. But let's not forget he is a commentator for one of the main networks as well. So maybe the guy's just thinking about himself. And finally, in the news, well, there's a bit of praise this time from a former NRL player. NRL great Paul Gallen has praised the New Zealand Warriors for their willingness to help kickstart the T20 Premiership amid the ongoing global health crisis. Speaking on Channel 9's Sunday Footy show, Gallen commended the Warriors for their sacrifice, their players willing to spend several months away from friends and give family to give the NRL a chance of getting underway next month. They've already come over here for 2 weeks, a few weeks ago, to keep the competition going. Now they're talking about coming over here in probably 2 to 3 weeks' time to stay for possibly 3 or 4 months, according to Gallen. We don't know how long they're going to have to stay in isolation. As we know, this is continually changing every day, this pandemic, but they may be in isolation for up to 3 months away from their families. So for them to be considering it, I just take my hat off to them. I just couldn't imagine being away from my family for 3 months in isolation. So there you go, team. A little bit of common sense, I think, from Paul Gallen. So maybe he hasn't taken too many knocks in his time in the game, and also we know him as a boxer. I don't know if he's gone fully professional these days, but he's making some sense, in my opinion.
Yep, and I thought you were going to pick up on the news that Sonny Bill Williams was looking at a boxing bout with an ex NRL player as well, that I saw somewhere on the news. So, yeah, boxing and NRL seem to go hand in hand, don't they? So that might be coming up later in the year, obviously only if they can have crowds, etc. So look out for that, folks, as well. You might see that that's in the near future. Moving on to other sports news then. Esports has been rocked. Jared Topics fell, resigned publicly from his role at Oddity Esports, one of the top esports platforms in Australia. He was one of the co-founders there. So he resigned on April the 12th. Since then, it's come out that about allegations of sexual misconduct and grooming have emerged since then. We have to do a hat tip to Ellie Rue Hall, who was the person who came out and talked about this. That kind of behaviour obviously is despicable, is not acceptable. Since she's come out, several other people have contacted her to say that they also received those sort of approaches from him as well, asking basically for sexually explicit pictures, etc., images in return for exposure in esports. She previously was a member of the Paladin team and has since stepped down from fighting from playing with them. To be fair to Oddity, they have stepped up and obviously acted swiftly once they've known about what was going on. In their statement, they said that on behalf of Luke, Melvin, and all of Oddity Esports, that we express our deepest contempt and consternation for the actions of an individual former business associate in light of events that have recently been brought to our attention. So you can see why it's happened, and it's good to see that they moved swiftly. In other esports news, Scott McLeod crashed out of the latest virtual IndyCar race. You remember we mentioned that he came second in the last race to his French teammate. In this one, he was leading, or was fighting for the lead when they came up against a back marker, and him and his teammate, him and his other teammate, got taken out, and he was heard saying, "It's just a game. It's just a game. It's just a game." clearly he was extremely mad with himself, and there were also other tweets going on between racers who were angry about this. It clearly shows that these racers, these drivers, are taking it very, very seriously, and the sponsors are as well, because a number of drivers initially were skeptical about it, have come back and got involved because of the exposure it's giving to their sponsors. In the end, though, Simon Pinot, the Frenchman, got his second straight victory. So the Penske team doing very well in this format of racing. Other sport that's going on, the PDC Home Tour has kicked off, and they've had a perfect 9-dart finish. Luke Woodhouse did that in his kitchen. They are streaming, and he went on to win a 5-0 victory over world number 3 Gwen Price. So obviously had a very good, obviously perhaps one of those players that prefers, or that's better on the practice board than is in playtime, as we've talked about that, so that the less pressure or the removal of the pressure of the crowds, etc., might see some players play well better, play better than others. That is still being streamed, so if you want to go watch it, you can register and watch it for free on PDC's own TV channel. On last bit of news again is Devin Hanley, the boxer, has been accused of racism. At the end, during an interview, he said he would never lose to a white boy, and the 21-year-old says he is not racist, and he does not believe in any kind of discrimination, but has not come out and apologized for what he said. He just said he just denies that it's racist. That what he said. He said, "Fight a white boy 10 times, I'm going to beat him 10 times." Hopefully, he'll learn from what he's been said, and he'll move away from that kind of talk in the future. That is your sports news for today on the New Zealand Sports Radio. We'll be back at 8 a.m. tomorrow with the morning sports briefing, and also today at 2 p.m. with the long talk and it's going to be about surfing today. Don't forget also that you can also enter your teams. Go yourself a mate and enter Do You Know Sport, the best sports quiz on radio, and you can win yourself bragging rights. That's right, we have the biggest prizes here on New Zealand Sport Radio. Thank you to Archwin, thank you to Stephen, and everyone stay safe in your bubble.